Welcome to the Two Israels podcast. I'm sitting with Yaron Brook, the founder and the founder of the Ayn Rand Center.
No, I'm chairman of the board today. I was the CEO for 17 years, but somebody else founded the institute.
Okay, I have to review my history.
Mike Berliner and Leonard Peacock founded the institute well before me. Yeah.
Okay, and we are currently at the Freedom Con in Israel, I guess the rather unique conference that values individual rights and limited government in Israel, part of the Israel, and I guess it's a connection with the Israel Freedom Movement as well.
Yes.
And you had an excellent talk today about equality, why equality is unfair.
Yes. I've got a book called Equal is Unfair. You can get it on Amazon.
Uh-huh. And as you know, I described the Two Israels project to you, the Two Israels project and podcast, dealing with the similar values about the founding of the United States and the values that they share with, I guess you would call it, if there is an Israeli national character, the Israeli national character. The idea of individual freedoms and also with an attendant morality that goes with it.
Yeah.
Now, I was getting straight to the point because our battery is very limited here. So I wanted to ask you a question. When you hear the term New Israel, which was historically applied to the United States before the revolution, what kind of values do you connect with that? From the point of view, I guess, of an egoist, of someone who's a student of Ayn Rand?
Well, I mean, I think that the values associated with that are the values of the American founding. I think the American founding is the most profound political event in human history. I think the Declaration of Independence is the most important political document ever written. And it's sad to me that very few people understand the Declaration of Independence. But it's associated with the idea of individual liberty, of the idea of inalienable rights that cannot be taken away. Not by a majority, not by voting, not by anybody, not by a king, not by a god, nobody. Right to life, liberty, property, I wish there was there, and pursuit of happiness. That to me are the values that politically matter, the only values that politically matter. Government only role is to protect those rights. Its only role is to protect individual rights and otherwise leave us alone. And I think to a large extent that was the founders' view, although they compromised with it quite dramatically from the beginning. And I think we're still living with the sad consequences of those compromises that they made very early on.
Okay, and this being I guess the pole in the Middle East of that connection of the two Israels, do you feel that in some ways Israel is following through on those same ideals? Yeah. Do you think it's being less so, more so?
Well, I mean, I think those ideas are dying in America. I think we've lost them. I don't see anybody in politics today, with maybe a handful of exceptions, representing those ideas. I think that those ideas are lost in the Supreme Court. I think they're lost certainly on this president and on almost all presidents of the last 100 years. So I think the United States is clearly moving in the wrong direction, away from the founding. It's rejecting the founding. Okay. And I think Israel, on the other hand, is, to some extent, it looks like, we'll see how things develop, is discovering them. I mean, I grew up in Israel when it was a dedicated socialist country, where it was founded by socialists, by former communists, by former Leninists. And it has moved a long way from there, and in some sense has become more American over time, and that is adopting those fundamental ideas of the American founding. And I see more hope today, partially because Israel's small, and you can have a bigger impact. Partially because Israelis are more intellectual than Americans. They read more, they engage in debate more, they argue ideas more. I actually have more hope right now, and I could be proven wrong, but I have more hope right now that Israel follows through on the path of liberty, on the path of the founding, as America descends into the sunset. And to me, it's tragic because I consider myself an American, and I love America, and there's something about the American spirit that Israel has not been able to capture. There's still something about that American sense of life, that individualism, that still doesn't exist in Israel.
I see. Do you consider yourself an Israeli?
I mean, as a secondary thing, my first alliance and my first way I self-identify is American. Okay. But of course, I now live in Puerto Rico, and partially I live in Puerto Rico because I've tried to escape the collectivization of of American culture, which is happening, the tribalism that is I see on the rise in America, both left and right. I think are becoming more tribal. In that sense, I think America is becoming Europe, and Europe's becoming ancient Europe. Everything's falling apart. Western civilization feels like, and again, I could be wrong, and these things are very speculative, but Western civilization feel like it's imploding. It's self-destructing. The anti-Western ideas within the West, I think, are slowly destroying the West.
Given that that it's arguable that the Western civilization has its fruits in the Israelite narrative, and I guess you'd also argue maybe both in Rome, Athens, and Jerusalem.
Well, Ben Shapiro has a book out now arguing that
Yeah.
Western civilization is the combination of Athens and Jerusalem. I disagree with him. I think Western civilization is at Athens.
Okay.
It's not in the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's rooted deeply in the Greek tradition, and it is the Renaissance. The Renaissance of what? The Renaissance of Greece. The discovery of Greek sculpture and Greek culture and Greek literature and poetry and plays and stuff like that, and philosophy, most importantly. They really created the West.
Well, and yet, at the end of the Enlightenment, towards the end of the age of the Enlightenment, you had Christian Hebraism, and you had the movement of the Hebrew Republic. By the way, the foundational aspect of the two Israels concept is this the 17th century revival of the concept of the Hebrew Republic as a justification for self-government and as a repudiation of monarchies.
Well, I think it's all the Enlightenment went a long way to secularize our society, but it didn't figure out a complete justification for the political system they yearned for, which was freedom. And they were desperate. And so they looked for any source that they could find. And yes, there are elements within the Old Testament that you could, if you wanted to, describe as pro-freedom and pro-individualism. I think it's a stretch.
Yeah. Well,
right?
Samuel, the exhortation of Samuel not to take a king.
Yes, not to take a king and the way the tribes lived and the way the judges ruled. Yes, but in the end, they did take a king. And there's a lot of passages in the Bible, that are anti-freedom, anti-liberty, anti-free speech, anti-freedom of religion, anti those principles. So I think the Bible is written in a way, and I think cleverly so, where you can find what you want in it. And if you're a capitalist and a freedom lover, you can find that. And if you're a socialist or a communist or a fascist for that matter, you can find that in the Bible as well. I think both the New, Old, and Quran are all written in those ways. So I don't think that's a good source for knowledge. Knowledge needs to be discovered in reality. And I think the founders understood this. And I think at the end of the day, they got the concept of individual rights. They still needed a God to link it with. John Locke does that. But the founders were relatively secular. They were deists. They were very moderate Christians. They were far less Christians than Christians
That is a point of
today.
contention, by the way.
It's not. I mean, if you read the letters between Adams and Jefferson, where they're questioning everything and they're questioning religion, or if you go to Washington, if you go to the Jefferson Memorial, and on the rim of the Jefferson Memorial is written, I'm paraphrasing, before reason bring everything, even the existence of God needs to be. No evangelical believes in that today. No religious American. Jefferson, when he ran for president, was rumored to be an atheist. If you were rumored to be an atheist today in the Republican Party, you would never be elected.
Well, and then too, the politics was dirty then too.
No, I'm saying it's not the dirty part of it. It's the fact that they were more tolerant of atheists then than we are today. We are less tolerant society religiously today than at the founding, and we're a more religious society today than at the founding. If you took people like Jefferson, Adams, even Adams was considered the more religious of the founders, Hamilton, Washington, these were not religious, not in the way we think of religion today, not at all.
Okay. If Ayn Rand were around today, do you think she would consider living in Israel?
No, I don't think so. I think Israel's still too small, too tribal. Mm-hmm. And I think the main problem in Israel is tribalism. It's still true. We're Jews, and that's what's important about us. Mm-hmm. And that's what's missing in Israel. What's missing is the melting pot. What's missing is the true melting pot of individualism. The idea that what matters are the individuals.
We have Arab Supreme Court justices. We of course have Arab members of Knesset, and we even had an Arab Miss Israel.
And we have all kinds of Israelis who come from all over parts of the world. So that is all true. But there's still this sense that we're all Jews. And yeah, they're Arabs, but they're over there. In America, at least traditionally, I think it's changing. I think this is the tribalism. America, what counted was you as an individual. To quote Martin Luther King, the content of your character. That's what counted. And I don't think that is completely true in Israel. And hopefully it's getting better. But it's always going to be difficult in Israel, because Israel is always going to be the Jewish nation for a variety of historical reasons. And so I think that individualism to completely flourish and bloom here is going to be very difficult.
I see. Do you see we know now, the current president has made several moves that Israelis like very much, the movement of the embassy to Jerusalem and now the recognition of the Golan Heights. Do you see something like this, as some kind of, significant historical move that reframes the relationship between Israel and the United States?
I think it could have been if it wasn't Donald Trump who did it. I think anything Donald Trump was going to be tainted, is going to be viewed as tainted. I think people legitimately think the guy's nuts.
But let's put it this way, a great many people voted for him.
People voted for him because the alternative was Hillary Clinton. And yes, I'm worried by the fact that so many people voted for him. I'm more worried about the fact that people worship him. I see in America a kind of tribalism I never thought I'd see, where he cannot do wrong for many people. Starting with some commentators on Fox News on down. But he can do no wrong. But I think there's a certain, I don't know, he is a man who is not attached to reality and not attached to truth. And I think his character is so low, and that I think it will always be, everything he does, even the good stuff he does, and he's done some good things, will always be tainted by his moral character. And it's shocking that Americans are so forgiving of that moral character when they weren't, or claim not to be in the past. Remember,
they seem to be very forgiving of the Clintons.
Well, yes, but the people who said, "Oh, America's finished because we're so forgiving of the Clinton. Character's what's important," are exactly the people who are now completely forgiving of Donald Trump.
Well,
it doesn't matter how many women he sleeps with. It doesn't matter how many affairs he has. It doesn't matter how many lies he tells. None of that matters towards the same people who claimed the moral high ground when it came to the Clintons.
You don't feel that in some ways the press, with the exception of Fox News, is...
I think Fox News is worse than I think Fox News is a reflection of the press. The press is all biased.
Yes.
Fox News is overwhelmingly biased towards Republicans, and the others are overwhelmingly...
And yet the Columbia School of Journalism has considered Fox News to be the most balanced of the news sources.
Well, then I question Columbia's objectivity, because that's nuts. Fox is far from balanced. Fox is not balanced at all, and none of these outlets are balanced.
We have Shep Smith, who is center left, as one of their
Shep
most
Smith
watched.
does not consider himself center left. He considers himself center right. He considers himself a sane Republican. He's anti-Trump, but that makes him center left today. But he's not center left, and he doesn't consider himself center left. And before Donald Trump was elected, nobody thought of him as center left. But that's part of the reframing of the debate. Mm-hmm. If you're not for Trump, you're on the left. I'm considered left today.
So you think that the rest, say CNN, New York Times, you think they are more balanced than Fox News?
No, I think nobody's balanced.
Okay.
I think clearly nobody's balanced. You have to adjust in your head. I try to read a lot of different sources in order to get a wide spectrum. Mm-hmm. I know Fox is biased. I can adjust. I know NPR is biased. So I can adjust. But they're all biased. And they're all biased in horrible ways. And I think in some sense it's worse when the New York Times is biased, because the New York Times has a certain prestige associated with being balanced that it had maybe 50, 100 years ago. All the news that's fit to print. And it's so violently not balanced that is more painful. Fox was created to be a counterpoint to the conventional media. And people forget, and I'll just say this about the media because people are obsessed about this.
I didn't want to go off on that tangent.
When Ronald Reagan was elected, there were 3 networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, all left. There was the New York Times left, Washington Post left. There wasn't a single media outlet in the entire country that was not left. There was no internet, there was no alternative media, there was no talk radio before Rush Limbaugh. Right? And yet he won. And he won it with a relatively principled stand as a great communicator and an effective communication style. Today, we have a more balanced media than ever in all of history because you have so many sources, you have so many places. They're crazy right-wing conspiracy theories, they're crazy left-wing conspiracy theories, and everything in between, if you want to call it in between. And except an objective news service that was actually accurate. You've got everything, and you can fit and choose, and people do, and you can subscribe to blogs and all kinds of stuff. So people complaining about the media today, when Ronald Reagan managed to get elected when everybody was against him, is to me a joke. You have more means to access the media today than
perhaps Donald,
kind of media.
In that respect, maybe perhaps Donald Trump is a reaction to that to what was perceived by many in America as.
Donald Trump is clearly a reaction against the left. Donald Trump is the anti-left.
Not just that, I mean, specifically the media.
Well, partially the media, but I also think the intellectuals, the elites. But Donald Trump also, but it's also, in my view, the scary thing about Donald Trump's not Donald Trump. It's the people voted for him. And it's not that they voted for him versus Hillary. It's they voted for him in the primary. It's they were willing to accept a man who said, the world is going to hell. Right. It's not. Life's pretty good. Crime is way low. Immigrants are not killing people in the streets. All of that is bogus.
Is it bogus that that there's a threat that illegal immigrants might find their way to the ballot box and make a permanent...
It's a minor threat because as long as it's illegal, they can't vote. And Republicans maybe should rethink their approach to Hispanics.
Well, what about motor voter? The whole motor voter issue, the scandal behind the
last time I know that an American election was swayed by illegal voting was probably the Kennedy-Nixon election, and that was done by the dailies in Chicago. I don't know of any other election that was swayed by fraudulent voting. That, again, I think is mostly a bogus issue.
I see.
I think China's a bogus issue. I think they're all bogus issues. And the idea was we are going to blame the other for all of our problems. And in the past, the other was the Jew. And this is the same origins. This is the same direction the country's heading. The other was the Jew. Now it's the Chinese and the Mexican, but it's the same.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And then, let me just add, then, so life, the world is going to hell. The country's going to hell. It's not our fault because we voted for these people. No, it's the other's fault. And how are we going to fix it? Trust me. Okay. I'm a businessman. I built a lot of buildings, and I know how to fix things. Trust me. That is the recipe for every authoritarian in human history. And the fact that Americans bought into that scares the bejesus out of me.
You mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned something in that last sentence you made about Jews and about how we see, again, the issue of anti-Semitism, this time in the Democrat Party. Now, well, I don't think it's mainly been in the Democrat Party.
No, I think it's both.
There, but it's interesting
the guy who shot people in Pittsburgh was not a Democrat.
The guy who got guys in Pittsburgh was vehemently
a wacky right-wing
and was vehemently anti-Trump, by the way.
Sure,
but
why? Because anti-Trump wasn't right enough for him, wasn't populist enough for him.
Okay, I'm not.
But it's that part of the political spectrum as we recognize it today that he came from. Look, the anti-Semitism is rabid on the left. It's unbelievable what's going on.
It's mainstream in the Democrat Party now.
But it's in Corbyn in the United Kingdom. Yes. It's in France. It's all over Europe.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that because I'm getting back to the idea of the two Israels and Ayn Rand's philosophy and capitalism and the free market.
Yeah.
Do you now again we're seeing that the enemies of freedom, basically, and the free market are also the enemies of the Jew.
I agree with that. I have a talk that you can find on YouTube, on my channel on YouTube, called Anti-Capitalism and Anti-Semitism, and I linked the two. Marx, the great anti-capitalist, was a rabid anti-Semite, even though he was a Jew.
Yeah.
And he's got a famous essay called "On the Jewish Question," which I encourage people to read. It's on Marxism.org, and it's rabidly anti-Jewish. Because Jews are self-interested, which leads them to capitalism. And capitalism is a product of the Jew. And the problem of the Christian world, according to Marx, is they're too Jewish, which means they're too self-interested. Mm-hmm. So Marx understood it, and he was anti-Semitic, and he hated the Jews for their virtue, which is their self-interest and their entrepreneurship and their capitalism. And you're seeing the same on the left and on the right. I mean, again, I see tribalism on the rise in America, both on the left and on the right. And I think with tribalism comes anti-Semitism, and I think as you see that, I don't know if you believe in the alt-right or not, and it doesn't really matter, but it exists. There's such a thing called the alt-right.
Oh, sure. But many people, by the way, mistake who is alt-right.
When I criticize the alt-right, the anti-Semitic emails that I got, I mean, Ben Shapiro had the same experience.
Yeah.
are unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. I never thought I'd live to see anything like it. Swastikas, and Hitler should have finished the job, and we will finish the job, don't worry. And with Donald Trump's picture often, or with the swastikas on the White House, wait until Donald Trump gets elected. This was before the election. Associating their ideas with Donald Trump. I'm not saying he is that, but they associate themselves with him. And that, to me, is, again, very, very scary. And he does little, if anything, to distance himself from that.
I think that he does more, but that for one thing, the left press. By the way, the
I
whole thing about
actually
the
listened to his speeches.
Did you listen to the Charlottesville?
I did,
okay.
and it was awful.
Well, he very clearly came out against the Nazis.
They're good
very
people
clearly.
on both sides.
And then he said on the monument issue.
No,
and that's what it was.
He said it on the evening, on the march the evening before.
And he said it. It's on the monument issue.
But what was the march the evening before on the monument issue? What did they chant? Some of them are good
Not
people.
all of them. Not all of those people chanted that.
If you were in that crowd, this makes me so angry. If you were in that crowd,
yes,
and they are chanting "blood and soil," we will not be replaced by
That's
Jews.
right. Not all of them. Not all of them.
Would you have stayed there?
I might have confronted them, but the point
if I
is
had
that
stayed there, you should have considered me a Nazi.
Unless you confronted them.
Nobody confronted them. I saw the video. If people are marching, shouting "blood and soil," Jews will not replace us.
People should leave.
Absolutely, and if they don't leave,
they should surrender the public sphere to those who are chanting.
Then I want to see them challenge them, but they didn't challenge them. They walked with them. I saw the video. We all saw the video. They walked right past. And if you disagreed, I want to see you yelling at them. And if you're not doing that, you're just as bad as they are. So no, first of all, the monument issue is I'm with the people who want to tear down the monument. So if you have a statue of Robert E. Lee in a public space, that is a disgrace. The guy fought for slavery. That's like a statue to Hitler. It's no difference between slavery and the Holocaust. That's fundamentally the same thing. And if Jews march in Germany to pull down statues of Himmler and Goering, and then blacks and others should be able to march to tear down statues of Robert E. Lee. But the point is, if you see a group, I would never, no decent human being would march with people.
I understand.
Chanting Nazi slogans. So when you say there were some good people among them, no, there were no good people among them marching. If there were people yelling at them, then tell me that there were people yelling at them. But associating all those people marching there with those slogans means you're sanctioning what they said. And that's what Donald Trump did, and he knew what he was doing. Because Donald Trump knows the one group he can't offend are the white nationalists.
And he has offended them.
No, he hasn't really. He's distanced himself marginally from them. When the New Zealand shooting happened, it's a marginal group. They're not that important. They don't signify much. They just killed 50 people. I think you could say something a little stronger than that.
Okay.
I need to go.
Okay, thank you. We're with Yaron Brook, and thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
And we hope to talk to you again on the Two Israels podcast.
Absolutely. Good luck with the podcast.
Thank you.